This is an SM Media production.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the latest episode of the Celtic Report, your exclusive SM Media Celtic podcast. I'm Scott Pike. It's a pleasure, as always, to be the host of this show. I'm delighted to welcome two very special guests. You'll have seen them both on the Celtic Way. They both crunch the numbers. They both talk about the tactical analysis of the game, and I think there's probably as good a game as any to get some in-depth discussion on this show. First of all, it's a pleasure to welcome back to the show. You'll see him on Celtic by Numbers, Alan Morrison.
Yeah, hi Scott. Thanks, and thanks for having me back.
Absolute pleasure. Looking forward to this one, and it's a pleasure to welcome back onto the show. A brilliant first time in the show. It's a pleasure to have him back, Stewart Ross.
Yep, thanks for having me as well.
Absolute pleasure.
Good one to be back on for, I think.
It certainly is, and it's one of those games. Obviously, any Rangers Celtic game is massive, and it can go either way. But Alan, we'll get into it in depth. But the magnitude of this result, just how big is it?
Well, it's 4 games into the league season, so a bit of caution is needed. But I think Neil Lennon actually in on the Sky coverage summarised it quite well in terms of you would think Celtic will only get stronger from here, whereas I think the Rangers did their business as far as refreshing the squad. They did it very early. They've had 8 games before this, and a fully fit squad to bed in. And I think probably there's not the signs of cohesion that their fans would like to see. Whereas with Celtic, we're in a less coherent state than I anticipated, and I'm frankly a bit stunned as to the level of incoherence that we are currently seeing from the Celtic team, given where we left the end of last season. But we'll maybe get into that in more detail. But I think, in terms of the psychological impact, I think is probably far outweighs the material impact in terms of the league table, because it's simply too early. But I think the psychological damage is probably quite considerable.
Stuart, the past couple of weeks, there has been an area of negativity within the Celtic support, just in terms of results and a lethargic style of play that I think had creeped in the past couple of weeks. And going to Ibrox, and I think the kind of, as Al mentions, the psychological impact that would have, and to go there with a weak defence and come away with a result, I don't think it can be just how big the result will be. And I know it's still early, I know it's 4 games in, but considering how negative it was the past couple of weeks, to go there, maybe not play brilliant, and we'll get into that later on, but just to get the result, I think is just huge.
Yeah, it gives Rodgers a bit of breathing space, maybe, for those who didn't, maybe, or still don't, not so keen on his return. But I think, like he said as well, for the squad now, which has went through a bit of churn, more churn than we probably thought, gives them a big result, a big moment to cling on to, something for them to, a marker somewhat. I know again, performance and like Alan says, the cohesion's still a long way off in a lot of regards, but it's a kind of cliche, kind of big character kind of win, a big kind of, talked about, going there with no fans at all. Everything seemed to be pointing towards Rangers, getting the first win and finally, kicking on under Beale and all that kind of chat. And it's kind of, yeah, like Alan says, it's more kind of, it's not fatal, obviously, for Beale, but it's a bit of a blow for him psychologically, more than the kind of the table after, it's still 4 games, only 4 games, so a long way to go. But it's it's kind of gives Rodgers just that wee bit of breathing space personally, and for the squad as a whole, it gives them a kind of first kind of big win, which is something that Rangers fans are still kind of looking for from Beale.
Yeah, 100%. Alan, the team selection, I think everybody was kind of waiting with bated breath just to see how the team would line up. I think when the signing of Nat Phillips was announced, I think it was assumed that he would go straight in with Lagerbielke. Scales was obviously preferred. I don't think Phillips was anywhere near fit. I think he would have been in the team, but obviously Lagerbielke and Scales start. Turnbull, I think, was a surprise starter for me because I thought maybe Rodgers would want somebody who could kind of hold the ball a bit better, and I don't think Turnbull's the right call, but I think we'll get into that later on. But were you surprised at the team selection, or was it kind of fully what you expected?
No, I wasn't. I didn't expect, and I wouldn't expect us to throw in players that are literally just in the door if there's no need to. I think, from what Roger said before the game, he was really trying to get the most experienced team on the pitch that he could. And that doesn't mean to say the oldest team, it just means the most experienced of dealing with this fixture, which is why the only change was Abada for Yang. Yang had played very well actually the week before, but Abada has had a lot of success in this fixture, and therefore it made sense to bring him in because he really was lacking wise heads, if you like. Kobayashi was on the bench, which means he's probably fit. But again, Scales had been solid enough the week before. I mean, he is what he is. He's slow, he's ponderous. That's not going to change. But he's a trier and he's a worker, and he'll put his heart and soul into it, and he did. And it would have been foolhardy to make that switch when he didn't have a match ready person to step in. So none of the lineup surprised me at all. I think he just had to do the best he could to get the most kind of experienced, as I say, not the oldest, but the wisest, if you like, team that he could possibly get out there. And again, Turnbull over Home. Home was just a young kid. I think it would have been a lot to expect to chuck him into the melting pot. I mean, when he did play a couple of games ago, he had nice touches, but he struggled to get into the game. And I think that would have been exacerbated in this fixture. So it made sense. Turnbull, again, is an experienced player. He's been in this fixture many times. So I think that was the thinking, I suspect. And so in that regard, no real surprises.
Stewart, it's a fast start from Rangers, and they've got the ball in the net after a minute. It does gel, although it's not although the goal's disallowed, it does gel up the crowd. But rather surprising, I thought Celtic kind of did struggle to enter the game, but once they were able to get a flow, kind of 20 minutes in, I thought the way they were retaining the ball, I thought they were able to create a lot of space, and I just thought kind of after the first kind of 20 minutes where it was a bit of a blip, I thought Celtic were able to control the game really well.
Yeah, I think obviously you see the lineup, and you can't say it probably is the right lineup on the day, but still doesn't put you at ease. Seeing that back four, certainly centre back pairing, and then they've got the ball in the net after 40 seconds, and you're going, this could be a long afternoon. Obviously, then it gets chopped off, and you're still thinking, well, their kind of approach has not always, but when they've been at their best, has been starting strong and physicality, getting into duels strong and all that kind of thing, and that just didn't really materialise after the first kind of couple of minutes once the game settled down. Like you said, so much space, just a really kind of strange approach from Beale from the off to, again, like you said, you look at that lineup, you look at the problem Celtic had in the first couple of games has been McGregor kind of looking a wee bit like he's maybe lost a wee bit yard or two of pace, looking a wee bit ponderous. To give him pretty much the entire Celtic's own half on the ball was just it was actually astonishing. I mean, obviously you're kind of biased to a point, but you are looking at going, how could you have watched the first couple of Celtic games? How could you have looked at McGregor, looked at those centre back pair and went, this is the way to go? Just really strange. I don't know if the thinking was maybe they just thought Scales and Lagerbielke on the ball were just not going to be good enough. And to their credit, as good as it was, obviously, people are saying it was a great kind of, defensive performance. And I thought, Lagerbielke had his moments. Scales kept things pretty simple, but by and large, they were all right on the ball as well. Lagerbielke punched a couple of decent balls through the lines as well. Again, that comes mostly in the first half from Rangers just complete passiveness. And I mean, I had a quick look at numbers today when I was putting together a piece for Celtic Way Tomorrow. Just that kind of those after that first, from the first kind of 15 minutes onwards to the rest of the half, it was really a dominant first half performance. I know Beale said it himself that Celtic's goal came when they were in the ascendancy. Not in the ascendancy, they were getting back to the game. I mean, Celtic's possession between the 16th and 30th minute, 65 to 35. Dual win rate at that period of the game, far majority towards Celtic. Just given the context, given what they'd come off the back of as well, just to take that approach was just really strange. And I think from all the games this season so far in the league and the cup at Kilmarnock, it was, as I said earlier, chatting on Twitter, it probably was the easiest 45 minutes for McGregor this season, which is kind of I don't know. It's probably not fatal, but it's kind of, I suppose, from a Rangers fan's point of view, it's kind of unforgivable in the first, game of the season. And again, it's only 4 games, and there's a long way to go, and things can change. But I just think, that was a big kind of moment to take again, whether it was a approach or for me, I was looking at it thinking maybe they are just, they was trying to kind of set traps, and you've seen that with the instant that was the goal that Roof scored that was chopped off. That they were trying to get Lagerbielke and Scales into those moments where they were cutting out lanes and getting a bit ponderous on it, but just to completely stand off was, it was quite. And again, watching it back as well, we just watched it back a second time ago, and just still we'll get on in the second half. They did kind of remedy some of those bits, but in terms of that first half, after that disallowed goal, I think Celtic couldn't have asked for a more kind of comfortable 45 minutes at Ibrox.
I've been on record in the past day or so. I'm puzzled with Rangers set up, because if you're going to set up that way, there's 2 things you have to do. You have to really push the Celtics back line, which you know is potentially get the weakness, but you also have to be very, very compact. You can't let anything through. Alan, some of the balls, O'Reilly I thought was magnificent again, but just some of the balls he was able to ping through, like the space was opening up. I thought Maeda and Abada were eating up space. And McGregor, I think the perfect example. I don't think McGregor started brightly this season at all, but when you give a player with Callum McGregor's class that space, he's going to turn up, because of course he is.
It was almost as if they hadn't watched any Celtic game this season. It was astonishing, actually. To echo Stewart's point, I mean, what I was concerned about before the game was that clearly we've got Taylor's not very press resistant. He can be out muscled. He can be he's not the quickest. Scales ponderous, quite slow on the ball. Decent passer. Lagerbielke, very good passer, but young, inexperienced. Shifted to the right. He normally plays on the left. Johnson's not fully match fit. Hart is aging and becoming less agile before our very eyes. And all of those things were painful. And McGregor, too. McGregor, as Stewart alluded to, I think has lost a yard and is struggling a little bit, in terms of the physicality and agility in his body. As he's played a lot of football. That's a lot of weakness. That's a lot of risk. And I don't feel that they exploited any of it. I found that remarkable, because if you'd watched even the pre-season games, you watched all of our games, you'd have seen, Ross County, Kilmarnock, St Johnstone, Aberdeen, all put pressure on. I thought they were going to go probably with Sima maybe, and maybe Matondo, but certainly pace and really, really push and push and push and really press high and aggressively and just wait for that moment. And then, like you say, McGregor wasn't just getting a lot of the ball. He was in so much space, it was easy for Lagerbielke and Scales to pick him out.
Yep.
He was able to turn. He was in an oasis of space. He could pretty much do what he wanted. It was an astonishing way. And Celtic actually played the first half as they normally play. I was expecting us to have to probably maybe put in a double pivot. I was expecting us to play quite narrow. I was expecting us to be compact. I was expecting us to maybe have the 3 lads just, and it was going to be hit on the break. We just played a normal game. We could have been playing at home to, St Johnstone or whatever. So that was just remarkable, I think. And I don't understand what Bill was trying to do. And then, it was when they did get the ball, it was just launched down the middle. And actually, the centre halves were getting into a fangle on a couple of occasions, and there were a few little moments, I suppose. There weren't chances, there were just kind of moments of unease caused by that. But we're used to seeing the Rangers team with those players. We're used to seeing them get the ball wide, get overloads in the wide areas, and then start getting tons of crosses into the box. And we didn't really see any of that. Even the crossing was from quite a long way out. Now we know that the thinking might have been, Hart obviously is not as quick off his line these days. Maybe exploiting that gap. Celtic do like to push up quite a high line. They're not quite as high as they were under Postecoglou. They've probably dropped back a metre, maybe metre and a half. But still, it's still a relatively high line. But maybe there was some thinking there. Get Scales and Lagerbielke on the turn. Neither of them are as quick as Starfelt or Carter Vickers are. Maybe that was the thinking. I don't know. But yeah, it was. I thought it was a. I thought we as Stewart said, it was just a very comfortable first half. I think they didn't have a shot until the 43rd minute.
Joe Hart didn't have a save until the 85th. That kind of tells your story. It does.
Yeah. Just remarkable. Yeah, it's remarkable, really. So, and then what that served to do from about 15 minutes in, the crowd starts to get nervous and it starts to get anxious, and that transmitted itself through the screen, and I'm sure it must have had impact on the players. And actually, it was something I didn't really think about, was that actually, because I was just thinking, God, we're going there with a third line defense almost. We're not in great form. We haven't, actually, it's scandalous that Celtic, from the coherent attacking machine they were at the end of last season, should go to Ibrox in that state. Is absolutely ludicrous, and we can maybe talk about that later as well. But anyway, all that to one side. That was the world as we find it. Okay, and so I was expecting, no fans, the hostile. I mean, Ibrox obviously is a very hostile place at the best of times, and it was just going to be a nightmare. But actually, from 15 minutes in, I think it was more of a hindrance to the home team, because I think the tension and the disgruntlement from, I don't know what minute. I mean, Stuart will know this. What minute did Raskin play a forward pass? It was just back, and then launch, and you could hear and see the frustration and what have you. And I think I don't know if you were there, Stuart, but Scott, but that must have had an impact on the players, I would have thought.
Yeah, and I think it does, and I think that's why the disallowed goal is a massive moment, because I think we'll give you both your say on whether you think it's a foul or not. I personally have seen a lot easier fouls. I don't personally think it's a clear and obvious foul. That's another story though. But there is a massive buzz once that goal goes in. But straight away you just feel this deflated nature in the stadium. And that's just the massive impact. And Stuart, it's a big moment in the game. Now, Lagerbielke, first things first, is very, very clumsy on the ball. He takes too long. Is at least 5 seconds before to get the ball away from there. Dessers, we think at the time, does quite well in the press. Gets into space. It's a good finish from Roof, but it's obviously overturned. A, is it a foul? And B, why is Lagerbielke taking so long?
Go the easy bit first, then don't know what Lagerbielke's doing taking that long. Again, maybe just how the first half had panned out. He's thinking, is anyone going to press me? How long can I stand on this ball until one of you is going to do something about it? But just complacency. I think Rogers pointed that out firstly as well when he was asked about it post match. It's one of those ones that, to be honest, because you're watching it from obviously a Celtic perspective, you're just screaming at Lagerbielke, going, what are you doing? That's your immediate. You're not really that, and maybe that's a bit telling that I wasn't immediately thinking it was a free kick, and it's the whole point in VAR that you get to go back and have a look at it and go, he's stopped him making contact with the ball, as plenty of people have said, because everyone's had their say in it. Within the laws of the game, it's a foul, so it's a foul. So what's the debate? What's the what's the we're going to the SFA to seek answers about?
Yeah, that's stupid.
This. It's not anywhere near that kind of. I can understand if it's a red card, if it's a penalty, if it's something that's been in the last seconds, it's completely defined the game. There's an hour of football to play after this.
Yeah.
It's not worth, I didn't think, getting too het up about. It's one of, if they'd let it go for a Celtic pressing on, we should have had that decision technically. But if you went right, well, you're at Ibrox, 50,000, that kind of thing can easily go against you. You're kind of actually surprised that when he goes to the monitor, he then does make that decision. So yeah, I think the kind of reaction to it is interesting in terms of, that it's probably more a deflection from their bigger issues that they've got, quite simply. But yeah, I ultimately Lagerbielke should not have been taking so long on the ball, but he is fouled. Ref doesn't see it in real time. He's given the opportunity to go and look at it again. He sees a foul. It's a foul. So it's a bit boring, but
do you concur? Because I think the fact that, like, the way I'm looking at it is, and it's difficult because I've spoken to a few refs about it, and I've spoken to 4 refs today, and they've gave me 4 different answers. Like, that's kind of where we're at, like, with this thing, and it's that to me.
Worry, isn't it?
When I'm thinking of VAR, and England was a perfect example yesterday. There's a foul. I don't know if you saw the game between Arsenal and Man United. There's a foul on, I think is it Dallo for Rice's goal that Arsenal won the game on, and nobody, and like, I was watching Dermot Gallagher today, and he couldn't really come up with a kind of concrete answer on that. But is it clear and obvious, Alan? Is it a foul? Is it one of those where there's going to be so many opinions on it that there's no real, in my opinion, I think Lagerbielke takes too long on the ball. I think he needs to get it just into Rose's head before he does anything like that. I think it's a massive call, and it's one of those big calls in the game that can obviously dictate the way it goes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So listen, let's start with that. I mean, I think this is part of the narrative and I think football's funny, isn't it? Really, it has its own lexicon. It has its own tense, actually, in terms of language sometimes, and it has its own logic. And one of the pieces of logic is because Lagerbielke was a bit slow and did a silly thing, he therefore deserves to get fouled and lose a goal. That doesn't make, to me, that makes no logical sense. The two things are completely unrelated. Lagerbielke being slow and getting caught, in a bad situation, that's one thing. What then Dessers does is a completely different thing, a different event, a different action, right? So the facts are actually very simple. I mean, just use your eyes, you can see what happened. In real time, because Dessers gets to the ball a fraction of a second after he brings Lagerbielke down, in real time it looks like he's won the ball, and that's what I thought at the time. He's won the ball, and therefore it was a perfectly good goal. And it was only when you slowed it down. But VAR is there to check every goal.
Yeah.
VAR checks every goal, right? So it's not a case of clear and obvious error. It's the VAR will check every goal, and and that was clearly a key moment in that goal being scored, right? So it has to look at, has there been any foul play in the build up to the goal? So you then look at that incident. Lagerbielke's got into a fangle, yes, but he turns, he's got the ball in front of him, Dessers is behind him. So this notion that Lagerbielke kicks Dessers is a load of nonsense, because he's behind him. How could he possibly kick something he can't see? He's trying to play the ball. And of course, in trying to play the ball, he's going to raise his leg.
Mm-hmm.
And Dessers plants his foot in, because Dessers thinks he can just nick the ball. And you will admit, Scott, because it's there in black and white, does Dessers touch the ball before he touches Lagerbielke?
No.
Right. So he doesn't. So he touches the player before he touches the ball. The player goes down, and Dessers then runs away with the ball. It's a simple, straightforward foul. There's nothing complicated about it. It's dead straightforward. And all this, and as Stewart said, it's very telling, the noise and absolutely out of proportion that's being put onto this. But I'm actually quite happy about that, because I think this is all deflecting from what are some serious questions about recruitment, performance,
totally agree
individuals,
with that.
The manager. It's completely deflecting from that, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I'm happy if that doesn't scrutiny, to be honest with you. So I'm kind of irritated that it's just ludicrously being blown out of all proportion, used as an excuse. But on the other hand, fire away. Keep avoiding shining a light on what are some considerable performance issues.
There's the one thing that I think the big difference between the two sides is that in terms of a clinical edge, and I think it's apparent again just before half time. I was sitting with a friend and I said, Is a draw a fair result? I don't think so, because I thought Celtic were the better side and I thought Celtic were making more things happen. But Kyogo scores a brilliant goal. Now it's a bad mistake from Rangers to play the Rangers defender to play him onside, but Kyogo, Stewart, just that nature he has, just that clinical. It's a brilliant finish. The opposite way is a Rangers player, in my opinion, in that situation takes 2 or 3 touches. Kyogo just needs 1, and that is the big difference between the two sides.
Yeah. I suppose he had a couple of chances before it though, which is sometimes the way with Kyogo. He maybe, as much
He'll
as
score the harder
absolutely.
ones.
Absolutely. I think both of the chances. I was looking at XG for both of those chances that he had before then were higher than the one he did take on. But yeah, I think if you're using it as a comparison, then absolutely, Rangers don't have someone they can rely on, or they would have been playing in the team week in, week out. That's why there's been so much change in that team. To search for that, for bringing in 3-4 strikers almost, not one of them seems to have kind of taken that on. And yeah, I think on the balance of play in the first half, it was deserved. I think over the piece, you could maybe make an argument for Rangers perhaps getting a draw, potentially more, they might even say. But on the first half, like I say, a couple of really big chances before that. The one that Abada flashes across, the one that O'Reilly plays him through. He's got time to think about it, to size it up. Those were big chances, clear cut, big chances. And then obviously, said his nature, he takes the one that's the hardest, but it's a fantastic piece of individual kind of technique, the way he strikes a ball as it comes back up outside the boot, right in the bottom corner. And you're making a bit of a habit of it in these games, which is brilliant to see. But just in terms of, again, the balance first half, I think, Rangers created, again, all the noise about the VAR goal, all the noise about, they scored in the first 40 seconds. Other than that, I'm just looking at there, absolutely nothing else in the first half. I think XG 0.11 in the first half. We've got 45 minutes, the opening 45 minutes against that Celtic team, about all the context, everything we've spoken about there coming into it, and that's what you can put up as, like kind of touched on already, pretty damning. But yeah, I think it was deserved, albeit it was, the way it come about, maybe a bit kind of, it's a long kick from Hart, it comes back, it's poor header from Goldson, but O'Reilly, who I touched on before, that's who I've kind of focused my bit that I've been writing this week for Celtic Way. That'll be going out tomorrow. I think just his influence in terms of, like Alan says, Celtic did probably play their kind of normal game, but I thought he was really important and helping McGregor as well. Out of possession, we went 4-4-2, but then in possession, it was more that kind of McGregor's a single pivot, progressing the ball. I thought Taylor as well at times done well. Wee bit kind of flashbacks to inverted under Ange on a couple of occasions to help with the progression. But I thought O'Reilly was really important in terms of, kind of highlight that goal highlighted that he was not afraid to, as Roger said as well, do the kind of dirty side of the game, which the ball's right at him, but he's up. It's a good leap, gets ahead. And to be honest, I don't maybe give him too much credit, but when I was watching it back again today, when he kind of lands, you can kind of see him looking to say, is he going to get on the end of that? Just a wee kind of, he maybe, he kind of knew where Kyogo would be because he knows Kyogo's game by this point. So yeah, obviously a brilliant finish from Kyogo, but yeah, just kind of highlighted O'Reilly's importance as well, both, on and off the ball.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I thought O'Reilly stood out like a sore thumb yesterday. Second half, Alan, Rangers do come out a bit better. They press a lot better, and the thing with Rangers is that they are capable of playing some really good stuff, but in terms of end product, they really don't have none. And that again be another big difference, because I thought Rangers are capable of making a lot of defensive mistakes, but I look at like Kyogo, like in the first half, I thought Abada and Maeda were making a lot of kind of forward runs that were just, they were capitalising on them. Second half, though, I thought Celtic, when they were able to kind of get in behind, they were really, really dangerous.
Yeah, I think just to cover the goal from my point of view. Again, have they ever watched Celtic play? Have they ever actually done any scouting on Kyogo?
It's bad, isn't
I
it?
think there was no surprise about where his starting position was. That he was going to try and hide just behind the centre backs. So it's appalling defending in that regard.
It's
It's
100%.
incredible finish. I think it's one of these classic games. To come back to the data a little bit is where game state is really everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Celtic got their goal. They pretty much dominated control without creating loads of chances. They had control. They had the better chances. They got their goal at a great time to score, obviously, and then the second half, Rangers had to go for it. I mean, I said before the game I was kind of sanguine because I didn't honestly think there's any pressure on Rodgers under this. There's some key positions in the transfer window that he didn't get players on. He's dealing with an injury list that he didn't expect, and he's dealing with losing a couple of players he didn't expect to lose. And he's got all these new players that have come in quite late in the day to bed in. So I thought this was a free hit for him. I wouldn't have, unless he completely screwed it up tactically. I was not really thinking that this was going to be a lot of pressure on Rodgers under this, no matter what happened. But there was huge pressure on Mickey Bale and on them, Rangers, because obviously what happened in midweek, the performances, I think, as much as I've not seen all their games, seemed to me to be a bit disjointed.
Mm-hmm.
There's been like the odd 20 minutes of play, but nothing, certainly not sort of 90-minute performances, anything like. So, and what he had hanging over him, of course, is this thing where he's never really won a meaningful game for Rangers as a coach. He hasn't not won a single one.
No.
So that and I think James McFadden covered that in the Sky coverage quite well. He said, at what point do the Rangers fans and the boardroom lose faith that this guy can't win the big games? And I think that's why this is so damaging. It's not that Celtic are 4 points clear. It's early September and all that. It's not even that Celtic aren't even playing that well. It's the psychological damage. It's not just giving Celtic, players who have been now know they can go to Ibrox with no fans and they can tough it out.
Yep.
And they can grind it. They now got the confidence. They know that, and they know they're going to get stronger, and they know the team's going to get stronger. I think it's the confidence or lack of in can Mickey Beale put out a team that can win a big game. That's the huge psychological impact of this. And I think in that second half, we saw, to me, a team that, yes, they were pressing forward, and yes, they had to be more aggressive in the pressing. They couldn't be more passive. But again, what I've seen so far of Rangers this season is that this cavalcade of new forwards that have been brought in, the ball just doesn't stick.
No.
It doesn't stick up front. It doesn't stick up front. And if you're launching high balls into I think Danilo, to be fair, he took Goldson's long pass brilliant. He turned Scales inside out and he was one-on-one with Hart. That was a great piece of play, but he didn't finish. And then that, to your point, that's one of the differences with Kyogo. But in general, yeah, the it's sort of concrete boot stuff. Sima, Matondo, Dessers, none of them are very good on the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And the ball just kind of ping pongs off them at times, and that's a real problem. Because actually, I think Roof is your best striker, and I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if you'd heard it, Scott, but I was under the impression because he might be on the highest wage in Scotland. Where if I know he's on an enormous contract. I didn't know if they were trying to get rid of him to kind of cut costs and what have you. So, real conundrum. I don't, how's he going to get this forward line to kind of to flourish because we saw in that second half there was a lot of effort, there was a lot of pressing. Celtic were terrible actually in times. We gave away the ball at least 10 times in our own final third. Time and time again we gave the ball away. Larga Bielka had a few more mishaps. Taylor's passing was off. So it wasn't like we weren't giving up good field position, but very little came of it actually. And in the end, it came down to you might nick one from a corner or a free kick. It was really that. So I think that's the big challenge: is how do you, because the best players in that team are still the ones that have been the stalwarts for the last X number of years. Goldson,
But you said it McGregor as well, and you made a good
Jack,
point, McGregor.
Yeah,
you made a good point, McGregor.
Yeah,
McGregor has lost a yard of pace. Tavernier, Goldson, Barisic, they've never really had it. and they're losing it as well. So it's a big problem for Rangers. But Stuart, how much credit does Rodgers deserve for the subs? Because I thought bringing on Ralston at 65 minutes for Johnson, who is still getting up to match fitness, I think Johnson will be a massive player for Rodgers, and I think he's one you can already see Brendan Rodgers has a lot of time for him, and I think he's one that he has a lot of faith in going forward. Yang comes on and completely changes the way from Abada, and then home. I thought Turnbull was off. I don't think it's the game suited Turnbull at all. I've said that after a few games against Rangers for Turnbull. But I think he deserves a lot of credit for those subs because it just kind of calmed Celtic down, I thought, at that point.
Yeah, towards the end, I think obviously I'm forced into the fullbacks, just because, like you said, like covered, Johnson's not fully fit. Taylor looked like he took some sort of knock.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and again, you kind of looking at the clock, going 20 minutes to go, and looking at a back line of Ralston, Lavibelka, Scales, and Bernabei, and really, like Alan's laughing, and
can you ever see that back line again?
No.
Not unless we play like East Kilbride at home in the third round of the Scottish Cup, and even then, it's ludicrous. Actually, it's honestly scandalous. I'm sorry.
Some of these guys, and you can even tell Scales when they interview, they kind of know that they'll be lucky to get in squads the rest of the season. So those ones, but the other ones in terms of Turnbull was okay. I think him and Abada pressed Suter really well for, I think, the turnover that then O'Reilly put in for Kyogo for his second chance. You know what you're going to get with Turnbull. You're not going to, he's not going to put in, I just don't think he's going to put in a performance that's going to say, well, this really changes things. I think with Hatate coming back, Bernardo being brought into the club, I think his opportunities might be limited. I thought he was fine enough. But then some of the times he did get on the ball and looked to play a pass, it was often over hit. So you're thinking that's one of the things you're supposed to bring to this team, and that wasn't there. Home, again, like Alan said, it probably was too, and we've seen, with the Kilmarnock game, right, that was a tricky kind of place to go in terms of the pitch and the way Kilmarnock have started the season, but he's probably just not, the quality's obvious, you can see it, but just not kind of ready experience-wise, or, he's still a young player as well, who's played a lot of football in Norway, still a young player, still finding his way. I thought he kind of helped off the ball, though, in terms of, you've seen him kind of some really super secure in possession, so, a couple of nice passes pinged on it to Yang, I think. I had that kind of crunch and tackle on Cantwell, which kind of just at that point in the game, the last couple of minutes, just kind of summed the game up, I think. And Yang as well, I thought Yang was okay. Again, it's a difficult one to come into. At that point, Celtic are just kind of looking to see the game out, kind of just looking for him to just heat up some yards. And he done that to an extent. There'll be other days for him. And again, coming back from injury. Again, much what we've seen from O before. You hope and think there might be more to come from him. Come back from injury again, kind of the game state as it was at that time. He did kind of hold up well and stuff like that. But yeah, I think given that he was forced into many of them, I'm looking at the subs that weren't used: Bain, Kobayashi, Kwon, and Palmer. There wasn't many more options to go to. He was kind of forced into them. I think timing probably right in terms of that was the hour for Johnson. Yang and Home coming on around that time as well gives you a wee bit more energy. And like Bernabei towards the end, that was last 15 minutes, that's enforced, and as well, just to kind of for legs up front as well. But yeah, I think in terms of Rodgers, he does get a bit of credit for that, but at the same time, he didn't really have that many options.
Alan, one player I want to touch on who I thought handled his side really well in terms of kind of all round. I don't think it was necessarily his best day attacking wise, but just to be kind of limited Tavernier, who, let's be honest, is Rangers' main attacking threat. I thought Maeda just his work rate. We have seen at times his finishing effort maybe flattered his eve a wee bit, but yesterday I thought it was the perfect game for him.
Yeah, no, definitely worthy of comment. I think he did a great job of, I think, restricting Tavernier's runs forward. Certainly in the first half, almost completely actually, and probably to a slightly lesser extent in the second half. But yeah, you listen. The one thing I was pleased about, and again mainly in the first half, but a couple of times in the second half, is that he's been very passive on the ball this season. Maeda. I mean, he's not a back to goal player. He's not really a winger. Let's be honest about it. He's a striker. And generally, if you give him the ball on the touchline and he's not got space to run into, he's just going to give you the ball back again.
Yeah.
That's really going to be it. But what he did on Sunday is that he actually took the ball and then he drove with it and he took it and he tried to spin a couple of times and he really went it to Vernie. I thought that was much more aggressive from an attacking perspective than what we've seen from him this season. He had this little purple patch after the World Cup where he seemed to have this incredible self-belief. He came back with enormous confidence and that's what he was doing, and it was great to see. But he seemed to go back into a shell a little bit, and as the season kind of finished, and then this season, as I say, it's been a very slow start for him in that regard. But I thought, yeah, in that respect, he was good. A couple of poor crosses. Again, he's just not the finer technical aspects of the game are just not really his strength. But I mean, if you look at the pressing stats, I think Maeda had something like 30 presses, and the next highest of any player was 20. So he's been pressing 50% more than any other player on the pitch, which is just remarkable. Because he was on the pitch for 90 minutes, right? He played the full game. So that sort of unseen work rate, that how do you measure that in terms of impact? We can measure the presses, we can measure the counter presses. I suspect, I don't know, Stewart might know better than me. I know that StatsBomb have got all these kind of black box OBV type metrics, but I don't know that we can measure the impact of pressing. You can obviously, if you win the ball back, you can certainly do that, and I do that with my packing stats. If you win the ball high up, you take players out of the game because of it. You can kind of score people on that basis, but just what threat did you avoid? It's threat avoidance, it's risk avoidance. What risks and threats did you avoid because you were constantly pressing the other player? You made Raskin go backwards again. You made Tavernier go square.
Yeah.
You couldn't get the ball forward. How do you measure the impact of that? And when you're doing it 30 times in the game, those little margins all add up. So that is hugely valuable to Celtic, and he's probably elite level in world football at that skill. And if he had the technical ability of Jota, he would be the best player in the world. You know what I mean? With that pace. But yeah, that's such is the life of a professional footballer. He's lucky he's got. It's good that he's got elite level attributes at something. So yeah, in that regard, I think he was tremendous. Really, we take what we get with him as far as the sort of end product. Sometimes the technical ability to cross the ball well, some of the finishing, and then receiving the ball if he's not actually receiving it behind the defence. But the sheer endeavour and the sheer willingness to make life uncomfortable for the other team is just unsurpassed.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart, a lot of the credits obviously went to the defence and the likes, obviously Scales coming in, but is it more a case of that Rangers maybe were rather toothless up front, or did Celtic, the defence, do they deserve the credit they're getting for the way they controlled the game?
It's a bit of both, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not Lager, Bielka and Scales' fault that Sam Lammers can't put it in from almost an open goal. These things might turn. It's 4 games in the season. It's all right saying that now. Might well come back to bite me later in the season. But you know what I mean. I think Celtic, from a defensive point of view, from what was put out there, was as best as you could expect. I don't think you could have said, even if it had been 2-1 Rangers, I don't think you could, Lammer scores that one, or one of the late kind of half chances falls to somebody and they get away with 2-1. you probably couldn't have said, well, that, you couldn't have pointed a finger at most of the defence based on what we know the kind of standard they are compared to the kind of first team regulars like Carter Vickers, like Navrotski, these kind of guys. That was kind of the best that they could do, and they've come out on the right side of it, and they deserve credit for it. But it is also part of the other side of it is that there's that lack of quality from Rangers so far in terms of getting these finals. I mean, Lamar's chances is I think it was 0.75 XG or something, a huge chance. I know he kind of stumbles and he's off balance, and
Can I ask
these
a
things come
question?
into account as well.
What does Kyogo do in that situation? Does he round the keeper?
No, he doesn't. He shoots first time. Sorry,
100%. 100% he does. And that's the big difference. And for me anyway, like I'm looking at Kyogo and I thought like yesterday, for example, Rangers have, I think every single Rangers signing has you can see what they bring, but they can't play together. There's no consistency in playing together. Whereas Celtic would know what they're going to line up with. We know it's going to be a 3. You saw yesterday, I thought at times you were seeing like McGregor and O'Reilly kind of sitting back as a 2, but if O'Reilly wanted to go forward, McGregor would sit back. They would be able. There was a lot of space there to do. There's nothing with that with Rangers, and I think, Alan, it's very difficult for Beale to come back from this. But I think with Rodgers, and it has been tricky the past couple of weeks, but it just settles the support, that result, because as you say, it's a cauldron of fire going in there with no support, no backing in the stands, and to go there with a makeshift defence with a team not in great form and to pick up a victory, it just settles the nerves completely.
Yeah, I think it's only fair. You've got to look at both sides of it in terms of why couldn't Rangers score? Why did Celtic? Because I wasn't happy in the second half with the amount of times we kept giving the ball away in bad areas. I wasn't happy with that at all, and we butchered a number of counter-attacking opportunities as well. So I don't think we were clinically enough on the counter-attack. A good level European side would have taken 4 off you, I think, on a day like that, and would have defended with more comfort as well. But listen, this is Liam Scales' day. I mean, Liam Scales is your classic defend the 18-yard box centre half, right? Which, if you put Shane Duffy in, the much maligned Shane Duffy, if you put him in to that match, he'd have had an outstanding game because he'd have been still in the 18-yard box, he'd have been throwing his body away, he'd have been heading balls out, he'd have been brilliant. And Liam Scales was exactly that. He was launching himself in front of people, he was getting a leg in, he was getting his head on everything. And that's exactly what the situation called for, and that was his moment. Whatever happens in Liam Scales' career, he will have Ibrox 2nd of September 2023. He will always have that. Because he's not a Celtic centre half. He cannot control the game from the back. He simply doesn't move the ball quick enough. It's just a mental, physical thing that he doesn't have. So, but ask him to defend the 18-yard box and endless long balls and crosses coming at him. He's excellent, and I'm sure he'll have a good career somewhere. And I'm sorry if that comes across as a bit mean, but I'm just trying to be dispassionate, I suppose. He's at the end of the day, he's probably Celtic's 6th choice centre half. So all credit to him. Listen, he was tremendous on the day. He stood up, and he put his body on the line for the club, and I thought he was magnificent. And I'm not trying to damn him with faint praise. It's just that the game that he was asked to play probably suits his strengths. Celtic will not be having to play that way as they did in the second half in 95% of the games that they play. And not in Europe either, because there's very few teams in Europe are going to be launching balls from 60 yards onto the centre back's head, right? So it's just not. Lagerbielke, I don't think stood up to it as well. He's probably, I don't know how they play normally in the Swedish league, but he seemed a bit unsure at this sort of bombardment. I think he's got a lot of attributes. He looks generally quite a composed, tidy.
He looks really good in the ball. Some of the passing.
He's technically strong. You've got to be technically strong as a Celtic centre half. So I don't want to be mean to Liam Scales. He had a fantastic game, and I really mean that. But I just think it suited him. And as I say, all the stats of the game were really game state driven. When it mattered, Celtic got the goal. They got the goal when they were on top, and they pretty much just were happy to sit in and say, "Well, come on, what have you got?" And there wasn't a lot. As I say, Danilo, I thought was great. That takedown and cut inside. Hart was pretty good. He came out quick and gave him really no space to shoot. So that was good on Hart. And he fluffed that one a minute later, I think, when I think Seema got the ball in from the right, and Dino just stuck in front. But you could see how difficult it was for Hart to get his foot down, how stiff he was. But Danilo completely fluffed that one off his right foot. I don't know what foot. I don't know whether he's left or right foot. Danilo, but they were two. I thought they were two big chances, actually, two good chances. The Lammers one, I don't know why he's going around the goalkeeper.
It's baffling to me.
You get it. You just hit it. You hit it low. You hit it hard, and you probably score. And I'm surprised that Stewart, you said that was a 0.75 xg. I would say it's 0.75 xg at the moment that Lammers has stood in front of Hart. Once he takes it round him, he's actually outside the post. And to me, that would be quite a low probability chance. I would have thought.
There's a photo going about that I think makes it easier looking, but I think I think the best chance to score that is when he gets the ball. Because it's such a tight. I think
by the time he takes it around him, I think it's the XG's gone down. In my view, the XG's gone down considerably once he's taken it wide, because he's outside the line of the post at that point. It's actually quite tricky.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
like
yeah. Sorry,
I was just going to say yes. Starts bomb. Yeah, I was just had it up there. I think they had it as a 0. Through ball 0.75, and actually, even up until that point, that was the one chance, obviously, because it was Statsbomb registered at such a massive, value of 0.75. That was the first time that Rangers overtook Celtic in terms of XG, and that's in the 74th, 75th minute. So, you dock up to half time, but they then spent another 20, 25 minutes to get, close to Celtic. Again, in the context of what we were saying there in terms of the game state, it's up to the Rangers from half time to then go and, make the game. And fair enough, then that does take them up, and they have another one or two towards the end, half decent quality chances. But still, it's maybe shouldn't have been registered as big as that, but it kind of also highlights just how, even as much splitting it into, Celtic probably shaded it first half, Rangers shaded it second half. You can make an argument for that, but up until 75 minutes, you're then in kind of, throwing everything at the territory. He's put on all his subs. He's, it's not exactly. It's not the game plan hasn't gone to plan.
There isn't a game plan. I think that's a problem. I don't think there's a game plan. Well, I really don't. There's 8 games in. I think maybe more than that, and I'm yet to see where Rangers, in terms of like a structure, you bring in forwards in 13, 14 million pounds, and I don't see where they all fit in. And I look at I think this is maybe a kind of good way to kind of finish up, Alan. Like Palmas coming in, you've got obviously the likes of Navrojki, Carter Vickers to come back in, Hatate to come back in. Were you kind of surprised we didn't see Palma yesterday, or is there maybe more did the game was it maybe not ready? Was it just there as an option?
I mean, Yang at least had some minutes, and to be fair, I think Yang, he looked a bit nervous, to be honest with you, when he came on, and he looked a bit sort of rabbit in the headlights a little bit. And I think it would have been unfair to stick Palma on. There was no need to either, really.
Yeah.
And to your point, I completely agree with Stewart. I mean, I don't think there was any great sort of prescience on Rodgers' part. I mean, I had the notes that I take when I'm watching the game. I had Johnson struggling from 50 minutes on. You could see mentally. He gave a couple of floppy passes. He was struggling. His legs was going. His brain was going. It took till the 63rd, 64th minute before he actually got taken off. I'd have had him off probably 10 minutes earlier. Johnson, I think he was struggling at that point. So that was just that's a sub that had to be done. I think Taylor took a knock, so Burnaby had to come on. I mean, you wouldn't put Burnaby on to defend a lead in any other circumstances. He absolutely had to, because he can't defend really very much at all. Home for Turnbull again. Turnbull, once he starts to tire, because he's doing a lot more work off the ball than he normally does, he's not giving you a lot defensively. So it makes sense. Holmes quite a kind of tenacious player, so that all made sense. And he did it early. That's good. Just as I say, if I'm being pernickety, I would say maybe 10 minutes too late for Johnson. But and then, like you say, Kyogo, as Stuart said, you probably just want to have someone up front who's going to be fresh and keep the back line honest. Just hopefully it sticks a little bit, and always very very raw. And he can do the unexpected, as we saw. He tries very unexpected things. So yeah, listen, I was so just to be a bit nerdy for a second to go back to that chance that for Lammers, Stewart. I would give Raskin 0.75 XA for the pass because it's a brilliant pass. He takes out virtually the whole Celtic defence with that pass, and the position that he presents Lammers with the ball, I think is worth credit to Raskin of 0.75 expected assists. Lammers, once he butchers it, should have much less than that once he's taken it round the keeper. So it's a bit nerdy, but that's to me that would be fair. But my second point is probably back to Scott is why did it take until the 70-something minute to see Raskin play a pass like that? Because all day he was sat in front of the back four passing the ball backwards. He's clearly got the talent to play though. That was a brilliant pass, But that's the only one we saw. The only one.
I look at it as well, like obviously when the sub and you could hear the set. I've said it all day when I would talk about it. The second worst reaction in the stadium was the roof sub before the final whistle, but it wasn't the roof sub. It was who came off. Like, why are you playing Ryan Jack and Nico Raskin? Like, both when you're chasing a goal. That to me is ridiculous. And I look more like when Rangers obviously brought in Cifuentes. Like, Cifuentes is the perfect type of player for that game, and he's sitting on the bench. And it's there you question. I don't see Rangers are further forward than they were last year, and they're actually backwards because I'm not in the Champions League. As Chris Boyd made a good point, and I'm not the biggest fan of Chris Boyd's punditry, but he made a good point in the television. He says anybody that was wanting Rangers in the Europa League is crazy because you're 20 million behind Celtic. Celtic have such a head start, and I think it's probably a good thing. Where obviously I've got you both on. I want to talk about the Champions League group. Like, it's three really good sides, but it's three games. It's three teams where they're going to be open. We all talk about Atletico Madrid being a really good defensive side, but they're such a different side to what they were 5 years ago. And Celtic, Lazio, Feyenoord, Atletico Madrid, Stuart, it's not the worst group. In my
under
opinion,
normal
anyway.
circumstances, if injuries, the transfer window going even a bit closer to what we thought.
Are you disappointed with the transfer window in terms of not like is Palma like for Jota? Like, was a goalkeeper a priority? Are you kind of disappointed with the way the transfer window ended?
Yeah, I think you have to be. Like, how true the kind of reports were at the time of Rodgers' arrival that this was going to signal levelling up in terms of we're going into that higher bracket. A player that we're looking at going more 5 to 10 plus maybe. It's stuck rigidly to what it's been before, which you can probably have another hour talking here about whether the rights and wrongs of what the current model is. You can have plenty of positives on one side, you can have plenty of other, for plenty of counter arguments to that, but just taking it as it was, Alan and James have talked about plenty on the huddle, breakdown about those two key positions were right at the start of the window, were goalkeeper and left back, and it didn't look like there was much of an effort to bring in a goalkeeper other than the Croatian goalkeeper, which there then wasn't any other links, and it looked like the fact that they'd had to go and bring in another centre back to fill in, and Phillips didn't leave them then enough time to go and scramble to find the left back. I think that was maybe what happened. They just simply ran out of time because it was like then the reports were, they're looking for a left back, but
there was one for France.
Was there
unless
one falls on I don't know, but it seemed to be unless a left back falls in our lap in the last couple of hours of this window, we'll stick with Greg Taylor. Based on the evidence of yesterday, you can say Joe Hart and Greg Taylor are fine domestically, but that's not really what not where most kind of more ambitious set parts of support, not what certainly Rodgers, the whole kind of Rodgers package was, that this was the kind of levelling up in Europe. And it looks like as fine as that group is in terms of who should be competitive, even with what's kind of conspired the last couple of weeks. You just don't feel brought in enough quality. Palmer might turn out to be absolutely great. He might go for 15, 20 million in a couple of seasons if he comes to sort of even near Jaws level. But there's not been that kind of that quality. Not one of them that's kind of been. And again, Home, Yang, all these guys we talked about today that have looked good. You can see the quality. You can see what they're going to bring. Navrojki looks a good signing as well. Just you're just left. Even one or two might have maybe swung it a wee bit, but ultimately disappointed. Yeah, I would have hoped for a little bit more, but
Alan, obviously with Rodgers in the past, it's very well documented. I remember his phrase was at Terminado a couple of years before he left. When there was obviously the talk about like John McGinn, and I think it was Fabian Schär as well. I think there was kind of two big names, but you always got the feeling that Rodgers wanted to move forward. They always wanted to, as Stewart says, that kind of new level that Celtic have been kind of leveling up is maybe a good word for it. But I'm looking at the way the names that have been mentioned, and like obviously goalkeeper like the Levkovic was, I think he was the Golden Glove at the World Cup nearly 2 years, not like to the last two occasions. But I always got the feeling when Ange was here in particular that he did so well at recruitment. The board, who were getting a lot of stick the year before in terms of who the Barca signing, the Shane Duffy signing. We've mentioned Shane Duffy twice in the show, which I was surprised at. But I'm looking at that kind of idea in terms of the board got a lot of stick then, and then Ange came in, and there was maybe two or three kind of signings that were puzzling, but his strike rate was very, very good. But now with Rodgers coming in, and there seems to be a kind of lack of kind of investment. Maybe not lack of investment, but there's much higher terms of incoming money than outgoing money. Do the board kind of get a fair share of the criticism there, or did it kind of be kind of shadowed with how well Ange did in terms of bringing in players? Like how do you kind of assess that?
Yeah, it's all about attribution. How do you attribute the success that Celtic had under Ange? And on the Huddle breakdown, almost within about a couple of months of him joining, I think we had the discussion around, well, what happens when he leaves? Because he's going to leave one day.
Mm-hmm.
He's a hugely ambitious guy. He's a talented manager. He's going to leave, and then does he leave and everything carries on in a coherent way and following a well-defined strategy and everyone knows what they're doing, or does it all kind of fall into a pile of crap? And unfortunately, I wouldn't go so far as to say that has happened. I think Rodgers himself acknowledged that a lot of the organisational capabilities that he felt that Celtic should have had when he was there the first time, especially around sports science, analytics, recruitment, scouting capabilities, and so forth. A lot of those are now in place. So we probably, if somebody drew up an operational blueprint of a modern football club, you could probably put Celtic's organisational structure next to it with all the roles and the heads of and what have you, and go tick 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 tick. All looks good on paper, right? But of course, it's not as simple as that, is it? You've got to have talented people in all those positions.
Mm-hmm.
So, what if you've got the right structure, but it's full of numpties? You've got a problem, haven't you? Right? Because a football club isn't a massive operation, right? There's not 15 people doing, making decisions about which players to sign. It's like it's usually a few heads of department that are the key people in the organisation. So you got to get that bit right. So I think there's been a little bit of, I was very nervous that under Ange we'd moved back to the sort of manager is God type model where the manager is omnipotent and makes decisions about everything. And it wasn't just Ange, it was Ange and his super agent, Frank Trimboli. So it was the pair of them that seemed to have a lot of autonomy about what went on at Celtic. Now, Rodgers, I think, is an elite coach. He's not. I wouldn't think he claims to be an elite manager. As in, I don't think Rodgers sees his skill set as running a football club.
Yeah.
He sees his skill set as training a group of professionals on the training pitch and putting out a team to win. That's very different, right? So I don't think he wants to get involved in recruitment, but he clearly needs to be involved, obviously, and needs to have sign off. He needs to give his requirements, and then he needs to sign off on, yes, this is the one that we're going to go for, etc. And that all seems to be working quite well. It's just that how well are we scouting? Really, is what it seems to be coming down to, because it seems like we've been absolutely rigid in adhering to this model of get in a player who's sort of 19 to 23 in the sort of 1 to sort of 4 or 5 million kind of range, and then let's grow, and then hopefully we'll make a profit later type thing and get a couple of good years out of them. That's great. I think that should be one leg of your model,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't be the only leg of your model, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes you just need to get that player because they're available and they'll just make you a better football team. Because to me, I think the football club is moving in the right direction, but it's too slow. And if you benchmark Celtic's performance in player trading, we're actually being outperformed by teams like Midtjylland and Utrecht and AZ Alkmaar, right? That's ridiculous. Now they've got brilliant. They're excellent at what they do. They're brilliant at what they do, and they've been doing it for years. So okay, let's give the board some credit. Maybe we're moving in that direction. And I'll take that, but we're moving very, very slowly, because when you come back to it, Celtic have got an enormous financial advantage in Scotland.
Mhm.
If you believe David Lowe, and David, if you know David, but David was the guy who was basically uh, Fergus McCann's fixer, really, if you want to think of it that way. He lives in Glasgow. He's a
Mhm.
very experienced businessman, knows the scene, knows the city, knows the football environment intimately. Because of the bigger stadium, because of more season ticket sales, because of better commercials, Celtic start the season 15 million ahead of Rangers every single season, season after season after season. It shouldn't take a lot in the context of 50 million is a huge amount of money in the context of Scottish football, right? So it shouldn't take a lot to be able to put out a dominant team domestically, right? So therefore, on what you should then be doing is saying, right, our benchmark we were trying to get to is these European clubs I've talked about and above, right? These your Benficas, your Portos, your Ajaxes, that kind of status of club. I don't mean behave like them. I just mean that's your benchmark for performance. So how do you get there, right? And we go to Ibrox with Bernabei, Ralston, Scales. And it's just ludicrous. That's why I say it's ludicrous. It's actually ludicrous. You finish the season treble winners playing. You've absolutely wiped the floor with every team in Scotland.
Yep.
They can hardly get out their own half, right? Now I know, so there's a transition. The manager's left. Postecoglou was very talented, but you shouldn't be scrabbling around, you know, trying to put a defence when you go to Ibrox first game. Something's gone badly wrong there. At the beginning of June, 1st of June, we sat down. Goalkeeper, left back, box to box midfielder, right winger. That's what we need. Then of course some players leave. That's war. First punch in the nose, the plan goes out the window. So you need to bring another plan in. That's fine. We actually covered centre back really well. I'm happy with the centre back business. That's really good. But goalkeeper, left back, box to box midfielder. Bernardo is meant to be pretty special. He's meant to be a really talented kid, but he's 19, 20 years old, whatever it is. It's a bit much to go and expect him to dominate, Feyenoord's midfield or Atletico Madrid's
Yeah.
midfield, right? It's not, So honestly, this season, the Champions League's a write-off to me. My sincere hope is that we don't beat we don't beat your record from last year, and that we could maybe scrape the odd a win and a draw or something. But this squad, as the team as it is today, even if you get Carter Vickers back and Nawrocki, who's again new to the team, we haven't raised the standard of the team from a position of massive strength, massive financial advantage, having a modern football club structure in place. We haven't done it. We've actually haven't done it, and that's I'm sorry, it sounds a bit brutal, but that's my honest assessment. That's not to say that won't change.
Yeah.
And getting into the Champions League again next season is another game changer because the money goes up enormously. I think it's if whoever wins the Scottish Premier League this season, you're looking at 50 million for getting into the new extended Premier League.
Mhm.
That's enormous in the Scottish context. So that's why for me, as long as we win the league, I'm happy to write everything else off because it's all that matters. But I shouldn't be having to think like that because we should be more competitive in the Champions League this season than we were last season, and I don't think we are, and I don't think that's right.
Stuart, final point. Do you think, obviously, like I made an interesting point. I got a lot of criticism the other day when I said, like, you're looking at some of the signings in England. Like, I'm looking at Nottingham Forest signing Singari from PSV just after he's went before the Rangers for £30 million. Like, Is that obviously we know the money in England is insane and it is very difficult for Celtic to compete, but players that Celtic could try and lure with the Champions League, they're going to sides in England and happily sitting in 19th. They're going to Luton. They're going to places like Bournemouth. How hard is that? Does that kind of go under the radar? Just how difficult it is to attract players when you've got that kind of animal down south that's just getting bigger every season?
Yeah, well, it's the financial, isn't it? It's, you know, as much as you could sell Champions League nights at Celtic and 60,000, if you can't pay a wage that's even in anywhere near the ballpark of what those clubs down south can now offer, then that is the reality of it. And throw in the Saudi thing that's happened this summer. On top of that, you know, the kind of wages that, you know, we talked about, if deals were to be done for Mbappe or Salah the last week or so, just it's a different universe. It's miles and miles away from what, you know. But if you take it and you look at, like Hans touched on there, it's not competing with those, it's competing with those other clubs in Celtic's realm within Europe, that those clubs that I mentioned. It's, you know, wherever, you know, PSV got Sangari from 2 or 3 seasons ago, what was the scouting process like there? How did they identify him? How did they bring him in? How did they make sure that the environment was set up for those sort of players? Like Anne says, we've done bits of it, but you just want them to just, you know, kind of turbo boost it a wee bit. And I think this summer you'll probably look back on and see we kind of treaded water a wee bit. We kind of done much of what we've done before. We didn't take that kind of next step. So in terms of relating it to that, you know, it is almost, you know, a totally different, like you say, a different animal, a different sport almost. That, you know, yeah, Celtic were there or thereabouts with it, but only in the context that literally looking for the last kind of scraps off the Premier League table in the last couple of days, like literally the very, very last. So that's Celtic, you know, that's as best as Celtic can do. That's not to say that there was one or two players that you could get that could make a difference, but it's like I say, it's like that. It's looking at those clubs. What are they doing that Celtic can do a bit more of, a bit better? Can that scouting undercut a bit? Can we, you know, get these players before they're just breaking through, before they make that kind of next move? You look at Brighton, Brentford, those kind of clubs. Can we do, you know, in terms of Brighton, bringing these players, identifying these players from similar markets to where Celtic have looked at, but having a proper process? You know, we take in, you know, we spread that risk of how many we bring in. We loan them out to clubs that we trust. To, you know, we've seen a bit of that with the Austrian club. Maybe that's a sign that there might be something down the line that we can kind of scale up there. But yeah, it's been, like I say, I think you will look back on this and think, yeah, it's fine, but just wasn't it was, you know, still baby steps. We need to take a few bigger steps, I think.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up the show. It's obviously an international break coming up, so there will be a break for the Celtic Report while we focus on Scotland duty, but we will be back, obviously, when the domestic action kick starts again. To my two guests, thank you very much for going through it. I've thoroughly enjoyed that show. First of all, Alan Morrison.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Scott, and good to meet you at last.
Pleasure. And to Stewart Ross, absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you very much.
Yep, good to be back on and good to finally chat to Alan.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you all soon. Cheers.